My name is James Bellerini. This is my oral presentation for the Falmouth Flexible Photography MA Surfaces and Strategies module. This has been a difficult module for me, defined almost entirely by the unexpected death of my younger brother Nick halfway through it. And that event has obviously had a huge impact on my practice in terms of my emotional self, my mental state, my physical time and well-being, and of course the motivations behind my project work. I'll return to this towards the end of this presentation, but for now I'm just going to take a brief time to recap on my project, which explores the themes of mixed heritage and migration and attempts to understand the hybrid nature of these experiences, especially where the notion of belonging comes into play. In the previous module, Positions and Practices, I sought to find a way of visualizing what that might mean, and that led me to work with people with a migratory history, either directly for themselves or within their immediate family, and I was pleased with the sense of discovery and continuity within this initial work. For Surfaces and Strategies, I've been focusing much more on myself as a subject, which I've found to be pretty challenging. I'm not used to using myself as a subject. A lot of my commercial photography is always very much, looking outwards at what clients want to present, what they're trying to sell or tell. So being objective about what is very subjective has been quite challenging for me. It's led me to search for ways to explore myself visually, using scanners, collage techniques, self-portraiture, trying to find a visual vocabulary, and that in turn has led to a pretty diverse array of approaches and methodologies, which is reflected in my work in progress portfolio. So moving on from that, I want to talk about some of the critical influences I've had in this module. I've really wanted to use this module to challenge the sanctity, in inverted commas, of the images and my image making process within my practice. So I've been drawn to photographers who engage in the deconstruction or deliberate disruption of the image or images in some manner, be that either digitally or in terms of altering the physical surface of prints, negatives or the like. However, for this presentation, I just want to focus on the work of Christina de Midel. De Midel describes her work as the perfect excuse. What resonates for me is the way she investigates photography's ambiguous relationship to truth by blending documentary and conceptual photography practices together. I find that very exciting. And her work also asks questions about what is the truth of the original image? What am I seeing? What is the meaning of it in both its original context and its altered presentational context? And this relates very closely to where I'm coming from in terms of my own project work. But what I found really interesting is how she disrupts her own work, especially here on her website, where we're given these multiple contexts containing humorous, possibly fictional, outraged headlines from something like the National Enquirer or the Daily Mail. And this playing with meaning and the willingness to deconstruct her own work really excites me, and it's pushed me to keep questioning what I present as supposedly finished work and how I present that work. And it's also inspired me to keep pushing forward with the concept that I have within my own practice now of trying to create a kind of reportage from an interzone, from the space between fact and fiction. Something else I've found to be an influence, and which relates to de Midel's view that her photography is the perfect excuse, is David Bates' notion of the scopic drive, how the act of making photography and viewing it become sources of conscious and unconscious pleasure, especially in relation to the accelerated growth of photography we see around us today. And what chimes with me in this is his statement that because of that growth, we don't fully understand the visual condition we are now in. So on a personal level, that relates directly to where I've found myself during this module, caught between the tension of the pleasure of making images and the overwhelm of what has occurred in my private life. For example, in the past few weeks since my brother passed away, I've really noticed how much I appreciate the process of making photographs, the opportunities that this offers me to meet people, to contribute to other people's experiences of the world, to witness their experiences, but also to contribute and witness to my own experiences of the world. And this is something that I really need to reflect on between the close of this module and the start of the next. So on to tools, methods and mediums. Firstly, I knew that I wanted to expand on the collage approach that I used in positions and practices. And what has motivated me much more during this module in terms of challenging my methodologies was the drive to create a more tactile output, to take time to play and experiment with approaches that take me away from the computer screen and the onus on the digital. So I saw surfaces and strategies as an opportunity to do this. Early on, I began researching wet plate collodion, although it was something that I haven't as yet been able to actually practice. And also alternative print methods such as cyanotypes, which I did practice, but I have to say I failed at miserably, as you can see here. But this initial failure kind of led me to the idea of layering coloured transparencies using acetate sheets. And thanks to fellow MA student Hilda Musson, I discovered image transfer gels, and I began to create a sort of mock wet plate image process with which I could build layered collages. As I experimented with this, I also began to play with the idea that I was building a museum of the self, as it were, and I bought myself an LED light box so I could create an almost forensic way of presenting this work using backlighting through the layers and collages. Now, this homemade transparency process, if you will, is slow, and it has forced me to be patient, which is good, but also to reflect much more on what elements and aspects of the self I could present in this way. So I'm really only at the beginning here in creating some formal methodology, but I would like to take it further to create work on glass and metal. I guess the question here is, why does this relate to my project? I'm not fully sure yet, but there's something about being able to take images out of context, as I discussed with Christina de Midel's work earlier, and somehow altering their truth or meaning. And I'm also intrigued by the possibility of transparent layers or multiple layers, providing that sense of the hybrid that my project seeks to explore. As I say, it's early days, and I'm interested to see where this process might lead. This module has been a confusing one for me. I have been juggling a number of strands which haven't as yet resolved themselves, even though they may have progressed. I've already stated that I wanted to take the opportunity to create and play with more tactile analog processes, and I want to keep investigating and refining those, especially the image transfer process. Early on in this module, I learned to look upon images as words, and then how those words, in relationship with other images, create the possibility of visual sentences. Again, I haven't succeeded necessarily in achieving clarity around that yet, but it has been a strong presence for me throughout the module, and I've structured my work in progress portfolio with this in mind. Throughout the module, I've been attempting to refine the themes of my project and to investigate deeper ways of making images that complement and respond to those themes. As I've previously mentioned, I've seen myself as building a reportage from a liminal space or interzone, that point where fact and fiction meet and cross over, and bringing myself into the work more overtly as a subject, although challenging has become essential. It's almost as if I'm creating a museum of the self that goes hand in hand with the themes of my project, and it is my intention to keep exploring this. Finally, it goes without saying that losing my brother during this module has defined much of the module in the context of my project work. I'm aware that it has already altered my sense of belonging, as well as changing the dynamic of personal history and family. How this appears in my practice will play out over time. It needs to settle into me and into the work, as it's still very early in the grieving process, so its full impact remains in flux.